I'm going to show you the most dangerous volcano in Europe, and you're probably not going to see it right away, because this volcano has no mountain. It's completely invisible, unless you know what to look for. This is Campi Flegrei, a 12-kilometer wide crater hidden under suburbs and harbors. I spent weeks mapping ground movement and thousands of earthquakes to understand what's happening here, because 500,000 people live inside this invisible volcano, and it's waking up. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to see invisible volcanoes, show you what makes this one so dangerous, and explain why 3 million people are living nearby what might be Europe's next major disaster. Let's start with the geography. But first, where even is Naples? Naples sits on the western coast of Italy, on the Tyrrhenian Sea. It has a beautiful coastline and an even better climate. About 3 million people live in the greater metropolitan area. And if you zoom in on this region, you can immediately spot the obvious volcano, Mount Vesuvius, that iconic cone shape, the one that buried Pompeii in 79 AD. It's unmistakable. But pan just 12 kilometers west, into the suburbs of Naples, and nothing, just neighborhoods, the Pozzuoli port, some hills, and tourist spots. But what if I told you there's a volcano 80 times more powerful than the one that destroyed Pompeii, hiding in plain sight? Watch what happens when I switch to an elevation map. There, see it now? That massive circular depression, the rim forming an arc through the landscape? That rim, associated with a previous eruption around 15,000 years ago, creates this nested caldera structure. The outer boundary comes from an even older eruption years ago. Let me show you the landmarks that are actually volcanic features. Lake Avernus, a tough crater filled with water lying within the caldera. Solfatara, a steaming crater that tourists could walk through until 2017. Pozzuoli Harbor, built right into the center of the caldera floor. And Monte Nuovo, a cone that formed during the last eruption in 1538. So from above, with all this elevation data, the structure becomes obvious. This is a massive collapsed volcanic crater, what geologists call a caldera. So now we can see the invisible volcano, but hold on because the scale is insane. Campi Flegrei is 12 to 13 kilometers wide. For scale, that's bigger than Crater Lake in Oregon, bigger than Mount St. Helens blast zone. And it's the largest volcanic caldera in Europe. And unlike those remote calderas, this one has the western suburbs of Naples built directly inside of it. Pozzuoli alone has over 80,000 residents. The entire area of the caldera? Hundreds of thousands of people living and working inside the crater. Now we understand the scale and location problem. Okay, so there's a big crater, but why is it so dangerous? Let me show you something that happened here that's pretty unique. This is the ancient Roman market in Pozzuoli. The marble columns have markings from sea creatures that show the location had sunk 11 meters below sea level by 1000 CE. And here's the same spot today. The columns are completely above water. The ground moves dramatically, and this isn't sea level change. This is the ground physically rising and falling, and I can show exactly how much. This is 75 years of ground shifting data animated over time. Red means rising, blue means sinking. From 1950 to 1969, relatively stable and only slightly sinking. 1970 to 1972, sudden rising begins, maximum of 170 centimeters with respect to the previous measurements. Then it oscillates, rising and falling in annual cycles, about 10 to 15 centimeters per year. 1982 to 1984, the ground surges upwards 110 centimeters in just 2 years in the zone of maximum movement. This was accompanied by over 12,000 earthquakes with magnitudes up to 3.5. 40,000 people were evacuated from Pozzuoli. Buildings cracked, infrastructure buckled. This was a crisis. And then nothing happened. No eruption. The ground started sinking again. People tried to return to their homes, though many never could. The whole event became known as a false alarm. For about 20 years, things stayed relatively calm. Slow sinking, low seismic activity. Crisis averted. Or was it? Because in 2005, something changed. And this time it's not stopping. Uplift begins again. Total rise since 2006, 140 centimeters, almost 5 feet. And the earthquakes are back. This phase is different and accelerating. So what's causing this? Scientists still can't agree. So the ground is rising, but where exactly are the earthquakes happening? Because these locations are super important. Here's one earthquake from just this week, just a dot on the map. Here's another, and another. Now let me show you every earthquake from the last year. Look at that, they're not random. They're clustering around one specific area, right around the Solfatara crater. and an area called Pozzuoli. The earthquakes show where the pressure is building. Now let me show you something else concerning: the depth. If we look at these earthquakes from the side, we can see how deep underground they're happening. Most of them are shallow, really shallow, 4 kilometers down or less. All of them are stacking up in that same zone beneath Solfatara. 4 kilometers is deep for us, but in volcano terms, that's barely the surface. The earthquakes are shallow and concentrated. So what's actually down there that's making the ground shake? Scientists know that there's magma way deep down, about 8 kilometers or more. That's confirmed. But most of the action right now, the earthquakes, the rising ground, the heat, that's all happening at a much shallower zone, around 4 kilometers down. At the surface, you can literally see and feel it. The Solfatara crater has steam vents hitting 173 Celsius, hot enough to boil water instantly. And it's releasing 5,500 tons of CO2 every single day. For comparison, that's about the same as a persistently active volcano like Mount Etna. There's heat and gas escaping from below. The big issue is that scientists can't agree what this means. Some scientists think that magma is slowly pushing upwards from deep down, getting closer to the surface. If that's true, evacuation is the only option. Other scientists think that it's mostly hot water and gas creating pressure in the rock, kind of like a giant underground pressure cooker. If that's true, maybe there are ways to release the pressure without an eruption. They're watching it constantly. Hundreds of sensors measuring every shake, every millimeter of movement, every temperature change. They're monitoring everything, but still disagree on what it means. So what do the people actually living there think about all this? This is Pozzuoli today. Cafes open, people shopping, kids going to school. Life continues on as normal. But if you look closer, cracks in buildings, evacuation orders on certain structures. Some families can't return to their homes after recent earthquakes. There is visible damage. And surprisingly enough, most residents aren't planning to leave. When researchers ask residents about their biggest concerns, volcanic risk often isn't spontaneously mentioned. Instead, the real worries were unemployment, crime, and a garbage crisis so bad people were setting their trash on fire. And then there's the geographic reason for this feeling. An evacuation plan requires moving 500,000 to 600,000 people in 72 hours. But look at the road network. The A52 highway, a few regional roads, all of them are already congested on normal days. Most residents are skeptical about the real possibility to evacuate, believing it would be impossible due to massive panic and the huge traffic. The geography makes evacuation nearly impossible, and there's another reason people don't trust the evacuation plan: history. In 1970, the government forcibly evacuated the entire neighborhood, Rione Terra of Pozzuoli. No discussion, no warning. And the eruption never came, but residents never got to go home. Their community was destroyed permanently. Researchers have found that the community's sense of profound loss outweighs their anxiety about the eruption. This trauma stems from a deep distrust of authority, fueled by the harsh, uncommunicated nature of the previous evacuation. So their past trauma created lasting distrust, and this distrust creates a nightmare scenario for authorities. Let's map out the actual risk zones. Red zone, Campi Flegrei, 500 to 600,000 people exposed to pyroclastic flows. The red zone from Vesuvius, around 500,000 additional people. The yellow zone, Campi Flegrei, 800,000 people exposed to dangerous ashfall. Over 1.5 million people in the line of fire. The scale is enormous, and here's the cost. The total economic and social cost of evacuating 600 to 700,000 residents from the red zones could reach 30 to 40 billion euros per year. The plan requires evacuation in 72 hours, but if no eruption happens immediately, those people might have to stay away for months, years, decades. The emergency plan has no provision for this second life. The cost is unsustainable. This creates an impossible political calculation. Decision makers face two catastrophic options. False alarm, order your evacuation, no eruption happens. Or, missed alarm, wait too long, an eruption occurs. At large calderas, unrest rarely ends in eruption. Most warning signs are false alarms. This pushes authorities to wait until the absolute last minute before calling for evacuation, which maximizes the risk they'll miss the actual eruption entirely. There is no good option. So let's zoom back out and look at what we've learned. This invisible volcano, Campi Flegrei, is the largest caldera in Europe, home to hundreds of thousands of people, experiencing its fastest ground uplift ever recorded, producing thousands of earthquakes, exhaling thousands of tons of gas every day. Everyone has heard and knows Vesuvius. It's on postcards, but Campi Flegrei is the real threat, hidden in plain sight. Scientists watch it 24/7, every millimeter of movement, every tremor. There's YouTube channels where you can stare at the data live. And 3 million people continue living here, because the geography, the bay, the climate, the history, the culture, is worth the risk. Or because moving 3 million people simply isn't possible. The volcano is invisible until you learn to see it, and once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. The ground is still rising, the earthquakes continue, and the question isn't if Campi Flegrei will erupt again, it's when, and whether the people living inside the volcano will get enough warning to survive it. So that's how you find an invisible volcano. And now you know why 500,000 people have an evacuation plan they don't believe will work. And if you're into these detailed geography videos and map-based storytelling, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.